Okay, so what's the deal with Divinity Original Sin 2? You may have heard of it, you may have not, but if you're clicking on this video, you probably have. It's also probably safe to assume you saw the overwhelmingly positive reviews for the game on Steam and thought, why the hell does everyone seem to like this game? The reason is very simple.
How about you? Holy sh**.
The game is fun. I could just leave the video at that, but if you came to watch a review, you probably want an in-depth exploration as to why, how, and where the game injects the dopamine. Now, I'm no expert and I don't have any degrees in this subject, but I am a gamer. I have had the game's hypodermic needles sticking out of my very arms, and I can tell you from my own perspective why I think the game activates my happy juices. Much of this video is going to be my personal opinion, so don't track down my address to stab me in the ribs because you thought that Lose was a better waifu than Malady, or that pyromancy is stupid and basic. Also, I do know that it's actually called pyrokinesis, but pyromancy sounds cooler and I have to compare this game to Dark Souls at some point, so why not get it out of the way right now? With that warning about my incoming opinions out of the way, I think you'll agree with me when I say that Divinity 2 is rather nice to look at. Being the first impression that most games give the player, visuals are not to be disregarded. Even if a game is more fun than coke off a stripper, you may be a bit turned off if the game looked more like this. I'm even less of an expert on art than I am on game design, so let's get through this quickly. Divinity revels in varied and colorful environments, ranging from jungles to beaches to seas to caverns to deserts to tombs that you have expect ancient robotic skeletons to pop out of. The more fantastical areas, like the aforementioned tomb, are balanced with grounded areas that still have a taste of fantasy. Sort of like Skyrim, where the locations feel like they could exist, minus the giant acid-spitting insects. The particle effects on spells and tiles make magic and the inevitable inferno it causes come to life in a way that this game needs in order for the need of the gameplay to work as well as it does. Without the ensuing lake of fire and wave of explosions, stacking 18 oil barrels on top of each other and igniting them just wouldn't be as fun. The animations add a bit of personality to each race, with most combat animations feeling weighty and powerful. The second thing that enters your brain after the visuals is the sound. Sound being the second half of the sensory output that video games can give makes it reasonably important. That being said, you aren't always actively looking at the sound waves, so music and sound can sometimes fade into the background. That is, unless you're playing Doom. Despite this fact, it's very noticeable if audio and music are garbage. Divinity does not have garbage audio. Remember what I said about combat feeling weighty and powerful? The music I've been playing and will continue to play throughout this video is from Divinity's soundtrack. I know as much about the actual technical aspects of music and sound as I do art, so this could be another highly opinionated, slightly ranty section of the video where I pretend I know what I'm talking about, but I will spare you the headache of my bad script writing and let you listen for yourself. The music that accompanies the often tense combat encounters only adds to the experience. So, I like the soundscape of this game. The sound design and the visuals both work together to bring the gameplay of Divinity to life. Speaking of gameplay, I think it's about time to talk about that. Almost. First, the most important part of any RPG, character creation. This section is going to be a bit drawn out, but bear with me because I'll also be going over how stats and stuff work in this game. Like in most RPGs, creating your character is the first thing you will do. Or, there's the option to just not create a character. There are 6 pre-made characters in Divinity, and they aren't bad choices at all. In fact, the only thing about pre-made characters that is different from custom characters is that they get a character-specific questline and unique interactions with some NPCs. This is one very small gripe that I have with a game. Choosing to create a custom character will lock you out of these unique quests. It really is a small issue as the game has so much else to offer that 1 or 2 extra quest lines isn't a big deal. You get to take some of these pre-made characters with you in your party anyway, so you do still get some of the quests even with a custom character. If you're like me, you wouldn't even realize you missed a few different interactions until halfway through the game. I suppose this adds some replay value to the game if you are willing to go through it again. And besides, this is an RPG. Of course you're going to create a custom character. So, what origin do you choose? Humans are, well, humans. If you're watching this video, you know what they are like. We're big-brained and love money above all else. Dwarves, or short kings as they prefer to be called, are sneaky little bastards that can take an axe to the head without slowing down because their brain is such a small target. They would also do anything for their queen, if you're into that kind of thing. Elves are the tall, skinny, pointy-eared, tree-hugging hippies that they are in most fantasy settings. However, Divinity elves go one step beyond cannabis and also experiment with cannibalism. Lizards are proud and noble slavers who are generally disliked by others for some reason. Lizards are also a favorite among artists on certain websites, making them the cultural center of attention. You can also choose to be any of the previous races, but spooky. This makes healing spells damage you and poison heal you. I've never played as a skeleton nor experimented with poison spells, so I couldn't tell you whether this is a good choice, only that it is one. Each race gets a small stat bonus or special trait and unique spell, so choosing your race does have some actual bearing on the game. The bonuses you get for choosing a specific race are, in the grand scheme of things, incredibly small. Which I like. I don't want to have to choose a specific race in a fantasy RPG purely because I want a certain playstyle, or vice versa, and I greatly enjoy not dreading whether or not I will regret choosing to play a certain way. Now, don't freak out, but there are 14 different classes to choose from on this screen. This is because there's so many different weapon combinations and schools of magic in the game. The only real difference between a rogue and a shadow blade is that the shadow blade starts out with some polymorph spells and rogue starts with just rogue skills. These classes only affect your starting skills and spells and do not really have any bearing on the rest of your gameplay. Now the moment you've all been waiting for, appearance customization. Even if you decide that you like one of the pre-made characters, you still have full customization control. Don't like Beast's shiny bald head? Slap some hair on that manlet. Don't like how luminescently pale Lose is? Just add a little melanin. Don't like the Red Prince's dumb face? Make it look absolutely fucking stupid. You do get a few more options with custom characters, like the ability to choose a voice and what kind of genitals you have. Then you get to your starting attributes and abilities, aka stuff that actually matters. Attributes are standard fair RPG tokens. Add strength to become a Chad, intelligence to throw fire good, constitution to not have to buy revive scrolls as often, etc. Abilities are broken into two groups: combat and civil abilities. Combat abilities increase damage with specific types of magic or melee attacks, and others provide defensive buffs. If you put a point to Aerothergy, you can use higher tiers of Aerotherge spells and also get a bonus 5% damage with air attacks. Putting a point into two-handed allows use of higher tier melee skills and increases damage with two-handed weapons. Pretty simple. Civil abilities are used outside of combat. This includes sneaking, thievery, persuasion, bartering, and knowing the history of Dark Souls. If you ask me, thievery is busted and crime always pays. Talents are next on the chopping block. There are passive modifiers to your character that can change the way you play or augment your current playstyle. Abilities are sort of like perks that you'd find in other RPGs like Fallout. Some give you free movement, some make you resistant to fire, and some just make you heal more from eating. Then you can choose 2 tags for your character. These tags are basically your character's personality. In dialogue, these tags will appear next to special lines that you can choose from. You also notice that your race, and if you're playing a pre-made character, your name, are also tags. These tags work in the same way that the others do. If you're a lizard, you'll get unique dialogue options because of that. Same with other races. Tags are mostly for roleplay purposes and don't really have much impact on the actual gameplay. Finally, the instruments. All this selection does is change what instrument is most prominent in the game's soundtrack. Disappointing that your character cannot play the instrument you choose like I thought it would. It's still a cool addition to be able to, in a sense, choose your soundtrack. To show you what I mean, here's the same piece of music using all 4 instrument choices. I promise there will be no more music sections after this. Don't stress out about your character's class or stats too much. The class system is incredibly fluid, and once you enter the second act you can freely change around your character's stats as much as you want. Me and my friend had trouble with an encounter that included enemies that healed from fire because we had 2 pyromancers, so I simply turned my pyromancer into a summoner. This game gives you so much freedom to experiment with your characters as long as you have the money to buy a new set of skill books for an alternate class. I really like this feature. because as I've mentioned before, I don't like feeling like I might regret certain leveling choices later down the line. It also does open up a lot of opportunity to cheese the game by switching around stats, especially in the civil abilities, to min-max the game's trading system and dialogue persuasions. Do this if you really want to, but I personally don't get much joy out of it. Finally, you enter the game. The entirety of Divinity takes place in this view, with only a couple of short illustrated cutscenes in between each act. Gameplay comes in two halves. The first is wandering around and talking to people. Now at first this may seem boring. It is not. You can talk to just about every person and creature you find in the game, given that they aren't immediately hostile. Every character and important interactable item has voice dialogue lines, and do not envy the narrator who usually has at least one line for every character and item you can talk to. There are a number of encounters you can solve if you put enough points into persuasion. My personal favorite pastime is robbing people blind, then deflecting their accusations by calling them a racist. The way persuasion actually works is neat too. You can put some of your civil ability points into it, but every persuasion check also has an attribute tied to it. The higher that specific attribute is for your character in relation to the character you are persuading, the easier their persuasion check will be. The NPCs you meet in this game are memorable, even some of the minor one-off characters, like a pair of magisters arguing whether or not it's okay to imprison someone for colluding with a lizard. The magister in favor of interracial couples later caught us stealing and had to be burnt to a crisp to prevent being sent to jail. Another strange character was a turtle who is in love with a rat, but cannot keep up to tell it, so the turtle gives you a quest to unite her with the rat. There are dozens of unique character interactions, even with some characters you may not expect to be able to talk to, and different ways of going about completing quest lines and encounters without combat, some of which you will inevitably miss. The exploration of the game world is also interesting. There are plenty of opportunities to find things off the beaten path, or get to areas they aren't supposed to be in yet with creative use of movement skills. Pretty early on in the game you gain access to gloves that allow you to teleport people, and as long as you don't accidentally sell them like my friend did, there's no real reason to get stuck in the game environment. Even if you do sell these gloves, you can just teach your wizard teleport, or any of the other movement abilities that are available to any class. There are also puzzles in the game, and unfortunately, they actually detract from the experience for the most part. In addition to these puzzles, there are also a couple of combat encounters that have gimmicks tied to them that could be considered puzzles that work well most of the time, but the stinkers really stink. These subpar puzzles and gimmick fights seem to have coalesced in the later parts of the game and make them a lot less enjoyable than the earlier parts, but it is easy enough to find the solutions online. You know there is a problem when Divinity Original Sin 2 pipe puzzle is a common search. So, now you've talked to a guy, pissed him off, and he draws a sword on you. How do you go about turning that guy into a pile of charred bones? The second half of gameplay is the combat. Combat is turn-based, and, if the rumors are true, tactical. The goal of combat is to make the enemy's red bar hit 0 while keeping your red bar as full as possible. But if you're paying attention, you will notice that there's also a gray bar and a blue bar. That is a character's armor. Gray is physical armor and blue is magical armor. To deal actual damage to someone, you first have to destroy their armor. You see, this is where tactics supposedly come in. Some enemies have more magical armor than physical armor, or the other way around. So you beat the shit out of enemies with low physical armor and blow the hell out of enemies with low magical armor. Or you can just brute force it and throw everything you have at an enemy to kill it less efficiently but still as effectively. Armor not only protects from damage but also status effects. For example, a character cannot be charmed or set on fire if they still have magic armor remaining. Likewise, a character cannot be knocked down if they still have physical armor. Armor and health can both be restored during the course of combat with the use of certain spells and abilities. This is an absolute necessity if you want to stay above the poverty line, because revive scrolls do not come cheap. Unless you put enough points into thievery, then you can get all the revive scrolls you want. Now that we've gotten the main objective of combat sorted, i.e. what bars to drain, we should get to how to complete that objective. Well, that actually varies quite a lot depending on what attributes and abilities you have chosen. A knight type character will solve a problem in a much different way than a conjurer. A knight will engage in close combat, tanking damage and dealing more damage back to their target. A conjurer will stay back and let their elemental champion totems take and deal damage while they heal and buff their summons. One thing to remember is that classes are not set in stone. Loza, the conjurer in our party, used to be a pyromancer and started as a generalist wizard. She steals a few tricks up her sleeve, and uses the resulting patches of fire to summon fire totems. My rogue darts about the battlefield and gets guaranteed crits from backstabs using their superior mobility, and she has also learned a few polymorph spells to further enhance her movement and survivability. That's probably my favorite thing about the game. Finding a playstyle that you enjoy is easy. You can like the tankiness and brutality of the fighter, but you can also at the same time decide to dedicate a couple points into necromancy to get some more allies and a sweet healing bonus. And it will work out. Creativity is king in Divinity. There's one big facet of Divinity's combat that I haven't talked about yet, that I'm sure anyone familiar with the game is waiting for. Elemental tiles. A tile is simply a puddle of something on the floor. Fire tiles are created whenever a fireball hits the ground. Water tiles are created whenever a wizard casts rain. Blood tiles are created whenever characters are hurt, etc. Tiles have different effects on characters that walk over them. Oil tiles cause slowness, fire causes magical damage, ice has a chance to slip characters, and poison also causes magical damage. Water and blood do nothing. Now you're probably thinking, okay, and you'd be right. The real exciting part of tiles is not really what they do on their own, but what you can use them for. You see, blood and water may not do anything on their own, but if a wizard happens to throw a bolt of lightning into a pool of water, the water becomes electrified, shocking or stunning characters walking and standing in it. Fire can be put out with water tiles to create vision-obscuring steam, which can then also be electrified. Poison and oil can be ignited with fire to create a powerful explosion and even more fire tiles. Tiles can also be blessed or cursed, changing the effects of tiles have on people standing in them, like blessed fire actually healing characters that walk through it, and cursed water applying decay to those standing in it. This, in combination with most enemies having resistances and weaknesses to certain types of elemental damage, adds significant variety to the combat. You can't win all battles the same way, like if you go back to earlier when I mentioned the enemies that healed from fire damage. That made us go about our combat encounter way differently than most of our other fights because fire was our main source of damage at the time. This system is not to be underestimated, and using it to its full potential is powerful. Don't be overwhelmed, though. My stupid ass and my stupid ass friend got through the game without understanding how to do anything, and so can you. Combat is engaging, and the AI of the enemies will give you a run for your money. The AI does actually understand tiles, elemental resistances, and has access to all of the spells and skills that you do, making for a challenging fight that for the most part feels like you're on equal footing. Notice how I said, for the most part. There is one problem that I have with the game. Hold on, wait, let me explain. Can you, turn that off, please? Thank you. Wow, that was annoying. Anyway, I have one problem with the game's combat. This game is an RPG, and part of that deal is a leveling system and leveled enemies. I guess this is more of a personal issue with the whole concept of level enemies and not a problem with Divinity in particular, but I just wanted to bring it up anyway. Different areas of the map in Divinity have very distinct level requirements. This doesn't mean the game won't let you into certain areas until you have a certain level though. This means that even as a level 10, you can accidentally wander into a level 15 area, get ambushed by a single enemy, and get wiped in 2 turns. In my opinion, this is a bit frustrating, because what ends up happening is that you go through an area that you're properly leveled for, enter town, gather quests, and go for the nearest quest on the other side of town, opposite where you started, and be completely outmatched. You then have to reload and try a different quest because the previous one was too high level for where you are right now. There is no indication of what level is recommended for each quest to be partaken, which can lead to a little bit of frustrating trial and error as you try to find the right quest to do and level up so you can return to your other quests, or buy better gear that will put you on par with higher levels. That being said, it is entirely possible to defeat enemies higher leveled than you. It's just much more difficult and requires a lot more luck and skill. I don't know about you, but I don't have any marketable skills whatsoever, and a block of cheese fell out of my refrigerator and onto my pinky toe this morning. This is just a personal issue I have, and it's not the biggest deal. But if you think that the frustration of getting wiped over and over again is going to get to you quickly, maybe the game isn't for you. There have been many times where all it takes is a second attempt and a different strategy to wipe the floor with your enemies instead the other way around. If you've been paying attention, you might notice that I haven't talked about how a turn of combat actually goes down. I've probably been showing footage of combat in the background, but maybe I haven't because sometimes my mind gets all fuzzy and I lose conscious thought once I enter the trance of video editing. In fact, I can feel the black visionette creeping in already, so I'm just going to hand the rest of the script to my friend, who I trust will stick to the script completely and not get my channel in trouble because of its first video. Here you go. See you in a bit.
Alright, let's see what Jared's typed up for me. What the hell is this?
No, beneath that.
Why do you even have that?
It's not what you think. It's because...
You know what, Jared? Never mind, I really don't want to know. So, now that I'm set up here, I'm going to tell you all about Divinity Original Sin 2 and its combat system. If you're one with a likening to combat, this game's got a lot to offer. Now, during a large part of the game, you're fighting, and to start that fight, you gotta roam the countryside and beat up whomever or whatever you choose. It could be at the whim of God, your own sadistic urges, or the homicidal tendencies of an NPC who's willing to pay you some gold. It really doesn't matter as long as you're bashing spells into meat sacks. When you do encounter something to beat up, you enter combat, and like my friend said earlier, the goal is to empty their red bar while keeping yours as full as possible. And when you get into combat, a few things are going to happen. Number 1, your turn order is selected based upon your wit stat. And number 2, you stance up to throw down some spells. and you cast those spells with your action points, that's AP for short. And each turn you regain 4 AP with a maximum of 6. Now you don't have to use all your AP in one turn. If you don't use all your AP, it carries over to the next round, then it stacks on top of your new AP, allowing you to move further, cast bigger and better spells, and generally just tear up any enemy who crosses your path. Now what I didn't mention were source points. Seeing as how you're a sorcerer, some of your spells take source, and these source points are not automatically gained every turn just like AP is. They're finite. And seeing as how most of the time you don't have an infinite amount of source points during combat, you gotta use it wisely. So choose the enemies you want to tear up before you use all your source points on those little guys who don't matter. And managing your party's source point economy is essential to victory. During combat, there's a couple of ways to get some more source points. You could devour a corpse mid-combat for a little pick-me-up at the cost of some AP you could use offensively otherwise. You could steal an enemy's source points if they have any, or you could find a little puddle on the ground to suck up through your feet holes. As my good friend mentioned before, enemies can do the same things you can, including cast source magic of their own. So watch out, or you could be the one getting torn to shreds, much like how Lee Harvey Oswald used a combination of the spell Eagle Eye and assassinate atop the grassy knoll to shred.
No! I knew you would try and pull this.
Come on, man, the people need to know!
No. No, they do not. Now give me that back.
I hate this job.
Hey, where'd the... Never mind. So, what's the point of all this? Of the game, that is. Not so sure about life or this video, but I digress. This is the part of the video we'll be talking about the story. If you want to go in completely blind, you can just skip to the next section at this time here, but I'm not going to be spoiling plot points beyond what is revealed in the Steam description, so I don't really know why you would. This is a review of the plot, not a lore video, although I will be spoiling the basic world building if you really care that much. Are all the nerds gone? Good riddance. So, your wacky character is a sorcerer, a magician that can tap into the power of this magical life essence called Source. This makes you public enemy number 1, because these interdimensional bugs called Voidwoken can smell your source, and sorcerers casting sorcery is like the opposite of spraying a can of off. But your character isn't just some schmuck sorcerer. You're a special little boy-girl thing. You're a godwoken. A champion for your respective race's god. Basically, you're on a path to become a new god. Pretty cool, right? Well, the Voidwoken and the Magisters don't really want that to happen. The Voidwoken don't want it to happen because they're evil or something, who cares, and the Magisters want their poster child to become god, and not you. So you must master your sorcery and learn how to become god while also becoming a practiced exterminator and cold-blooded murder machine. The story itself isn't anything special. You're a chosen one, claim your rightful power, kill everything else. However, that would be doing the writing complete injustice. This game's writing is phenomenal. If you're already tired of me gushing about talking in this game, I'm sorry, but I cannot emphasize how much the dialogue makes the story. And even then, in my eyes, at least, the main story takes a bit of a back seat to the interactions with some of the strange and unique residents of Rivellon. I mean, you could talk to the ghost of a bull and have it read your fortune. You can find a genie in a bottle and beat the shit out of him. You can commit the perfect crime by having your party members distract the guards while you steal everything in the room and empty the merchant's pockets. You can get invited to a thieves guild by a cheese trader. You could even put yourself in debt with a loan shark. I think the best part of the story is the gods being appalled that their chosen one is this much of an asshole, regretting their decision to stick with me as I steal mountains of goals and sass them for dying. The story is made great by the writing, the characters, and your own shenanigans, but I do think it was a weird choice to have your boat become the new divine instead of you in the end. Divinity is also a really long-ass game. On my playthrough, it took over 100 hours to beat, although it is hard to say how much that time was spent slowly meandering about and touching every object and talking to every NPC. If you were to ask me, multiplayer is the best way to play this game. I'll admit, I haven't played this game in single player, but I would imagine it'd be a bit lonely. Sharing the exploration and the dialogue, working together, and snatching loot out of each other's grasp is always the best fun that can be had with any multiplayer game. Having a second brain instead of eyes also helps with the environmental puzzles and finding secret areas, if you really want a mechanical reason to have a friend. On a technical level, the game's multiplayer is mostly stable and works well. It occasionally has hiccups that come with every peer-to-peer multiplayer experience and a couple of random disconnects, but there is never an issue that completely ruined it. If you can, convince a friend to buy the game and play it with you. There's another thing I want to bring up real quick about the multiplayer, and is that this game has a Game Master mode, where you can create your own adventures to play with your friends, if you have more than one. I've only messed around the creator a little and haven't even seen what it's like from the player's end, so I can't really give any definitive opinions on it besides that it seems cool. On top of everything else, this game also has a Steam Workshop. If there's something that you don't quite like about the game, or just want a totally different experience, check out the Workshop page and you'll probably find what you're looking for. To wrap up this video, Divinity Original Sin 2 is a good game. It tickles the part of my brain that likes big explosions and damage numbers, but also appeals to my sense of a plan gone perfect. If you want a good RPG with mechanics that get deeper the more you stare at them, then you found it. if you can get through some of the more experienced grindier aspects of it. If the game goes on sale, definitely peer pressure a friend to buy it and play it with you. This game came out like 3 years ago, but I've just gotten around to playing it and I'm very happy that I did. This is my first time ever making a video like this, so any suggestions on how to improve are appreciated. Goodbye.